Okay. Um, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say that Mercury has greater prominence than Jupiter, because although Jupiter has its prominence and its energies significant, right? The energy that Mercury is Jupiterian. And so the way that Mercury is prominent is through a Jupiterian sort of energy, right? But because Mercury is somewhat in a better position, from the perspective even that it's not retrograde, and from the perspective that it's in the first house, I would say that Mercury has a greater prominence. And so yeah, like Jupiter and Mercury are very, very close in regards to their prominence, but from my observations, I would say Mercury is a bit more prominent than Jupiter. Mercury is definitely a bit more prominent than Jupiter. And even the simple fact that Mercury, like Mercury's aspects, for example, before we look into Mercury's aspect, we can talk about Jupiter's aspect. So Jupiter is trining the moon, right? And the moon is in a succeedent house. It's in the 11th house, which is the second house that comes after the angular houses. The angular houses are always going to be the first house. And then the succeeding house is going to be the house that follows, right? It's kind of like the cardinal signs being the first signs of like the season, if that makes sense. They're like the initiators. The angular houses are like the initiators. But yeah, so although Jupiter is kind of trining the moon, because the moon is in a succeedent house, the influences that is created between that trine isn't that impactful. Whereas when it comes to Mercury, although it only has one aspect of significance, well, it has two aspects of significance. Mercury is conjunct Neptune and parallel Neptune as well in the sign Pluto. My bad. In the sign Sagittarius within Neptune. But furthermore, Mercury is parallel your ascendant. So yeah, in conclusion, the most prominent planet here is Mercury. And then after Mercury, it's Jupiter. Then after Jupiter, it's Neptune. Then after Neptune is Pluto. Right? Okay. And so, what does this all mean? When it comes to the angular houses, right? Like, each house for sure is, has like a greater, hold on, give me a sec. Each angular house has a greater influence than the cadent or succeedent houses, but like especially as a human, right? Because we humans have this capacity, you can say, for free will and to write our own destiny. The planets that are on the left side of the chart, right, or the houses that are on the left side, kind of have a greater triumph in gaining impact and influence than do the houses, the angular houses on the right side of the chart, meaning the first and 10th house kind of being more impactful than the 4th and 7th house. I hope that makes sense to you. Simply because, you know, with the first house, it's energy that's within your own hands, right? It's energies that deals with your personal life, your personal experiences, your personality, right? Things like that. Meanwhile, things with the 7th house kind of deal with things outside of your control. Things like your partners, whether that's business partners. Like, if you're having Jupiter in the 7th house, but with it being in the sign Gemini, this energy is like you attracting various kind of partners that embody that Jupiterian energy, right? Of Buddhas, teachers, gurus, monks, if what I'm saying, or philanthropists, wealthy people, generous people, right? Also Jupiterian energy. But with Jupiter being within the sign Gemini, you know, this energy of the sign Gemini in Jupiter, what it does is it's not too bad per se, but it's not the best. Like, because the interesting thing about Gemini and Sagittarius is how similar they are, right? They both embody that teacher student type of energy, right? Both Gemini and Sagittarius want to be teachers and want to be students, right? But Gemini is more polarized towards the learning and the education aspect of things. Meanwhile, you know, Sagittarius is more polarized towards the teaching end of things. And so when it comes to the energy of Sagittarius, which is where you have Mercury in, you know, Sagittarius is the sign that deals with experience. And so a lot of the times what may happen when Mercury is in the sign of Sagittarius is that Mercury may, rather than sitting down and thinking things or planning things, it may be more spontaneous, right? It may be more daring, more adventurous type energy, in the sense that when it comes to Mercury and Sagittarius, Mercury kind of doesn't think, but it may rely, for example, upon optimism, blind optimism. It may rely more on faith, you feel me, rather than concrete logic and rationality. And that's where Mercury's domain is. That's where Mercury needs to be. Like, I'm not saying that it's a negative to be faithful and optimistic. Like, that's important for Jupiterian energy, 100%. But when it's mercurial and when it's things that you should be, you know, calculative about and rational about, but instead you're just kind of like, it can work for sure. I'm not saying it can't work, it can. But I'm more so just pointing the shortage that expresses through this energy, and why Mercury isn't the most exalted in this sign of Sagittarius. But I mean, the more positive attribute and quality of it is Mercury in Sagittarius is very philosophical, very spiritual, very religious. And so when I think of religion, right, like there is this mainstream definition that spiritual individuals don't like, but simultaneously I like to engage this perception on religion that kind of encompasses a religious individual that embodies all religions. So kind of like ominous energy or Sagittarius energy, because Sagittarius / Jupiter is the planet that governs all religions. So in my perspective, it's like to be Jupiterian / to be religious means to be all religion, you feel what I'm saying, and having a capacity to grasp the truth and illuminate and devote to various experiences from various different religions. But that's beside the point, though. That's beside the point. I want to get back into the Mercury energy. So with Mercury being the most prominent planet within this Sagittarian energy, it's like mercurial energy, but mercurial energy being very prominent, but really though it's Jupiter. But like I said, it's difficult to kind of pinpoint it to Jupiter, because okay, so let me explain it like this. So we all, because remember we were discussing the origin of the soul, we all in a sense have a specific origination, right? We all originated from a specific space or specific energy signature, right? Within the vastness of the universe, we all originated from a unique space. Like our soul came from a unique space, and that space had a certain energy to it, right? A certain vibe to it, right? And so when it comes to hold on, give me a sec, my apologies. When it comes to your energy, and from what I'm looking at, it's very, very spiritual, right? And so your origin from a soul perspective is not mercurial per se, but it's more so Jupiterian. And the fact that you having Neptune and Neptune also, so you having Neptune, Pluto, and Jupiter, and Mercury exalted does indicate intangible energies, not so tangible and physical energies, but very intangible and spiritual energies, specifically with the Jupiter and Neptune energy, right? So when we are speaking of your soul, and it's like family, right? Your soul family, like the energy that you came from, it is very Jupiterian, very orientated towards wisdom and knowledge and faith and God and spirituality, like those higher perspectives upon the Jupiterian energy. But because of certain experiences you have had post incarnating into this life that you're now dealing with, the energy of Jupiter did get retrograded. And so a retrograde is not as bad as a negative aspect. It's not as bad as a square or opposition in regards to the friction that they create. What in retrograde energy signifies is a reversal of energy, obviously, a retardation of energy, I think is a better word to use. So when it comes to your Jupiter energy, because it's retrograde, what this kind of indicates is that there may have been certain experiences that made that energy repressed even. So when it comes to expression of one's spirituality and one's religion, and one's perception and viewpoint on life, on source, and on the greater things of life. There may be certain energies that are somewhat restricted there. Like, to kind of give an example is Mercury retrograde, for example, right? In contrast to Jupiter retrograde. When Mercury is retrograde, then the individual, regardless of how actually intellectual they may be, they may have certain unconscious limitations that in a sense prohibit them from fully expressing that intellect and fully letting the world hear their intelligence and feel and see their intelligence. There's kind of a retardation that happens, and I apologize for using that word because I know some people find it offensive. I feel like that's the best word to use to explain the energy of the retrograde, you know what I'm saying. And so what happens with retrograde planets is it's all about going to the root of set experiences you may have had, right? Going to the roots of philosophy, of religion, and of spirituality that you kind of established as a child, and kind of assessing where there may be certain restrictions and limitations that prohibit you from fully expressing your spirituality, fully expressing, quote unquote, your religion. You know what I'm saying? Your religion, not religion, but your religion. You know what I'm saying? And as a result, allowing yourself to be more freely expressed when it comes to things like joyfulness, when it comes to not only Sagittarian energy, but Piscean energy. And now we have Jupiter retrograde within the energy of Gemini. And so what this may indicate is that when it comes to Jupiter and Gemini, right, whereas the energy that I explained for your Mercury and Sagittarius, that energy of Mercury and Sagittarius is supposed to be Jupiter's energy. But instead, Jupiter has Mercury's energy and Mercury has Jupiter's energy, right? And so what happens here is logic and thinking and trying to rationalize things and trying to make sense of things that may be dealing with the broader picture may come into play and may interfere even how certain things are supposed to flow. And what I mean by this is Gemini is the thoughts, right? It's all about thinking. And Jupiter is like one's experiences. And when it comes to our experiences are very much tailored to contribute monetarily to our soul, right? So they're made to benefit us from a soul perspective. And truly there isn't a way to measure, what experience may be beneficial to this soul or that soul. It's very universal, right? And certain experiences that may be horrendous at times may be the most beneficial soul experience for the soul to benefit, right? Because it's not about the physical world. Like this realm and this body, they're all temporary, right? And to feel like you're rewarded according to your physical experiences is not justice. It's not fair, because if that's how the universe and God work, and it only rewarded you while you were here physically, then it would be like when you pass away and the physical comforts you can no longer access, then you will be in a space of a more heightened consciousness of a domain of the soul where it's like you weren't rewarded spiritually, only physically, right? So, but you get that point. I know you do. So, yeah, you know, from that perspective, our experiences are meant to contribute to our expansion, right? And that's what Jupiter kind of deals with and indicates. And it lets us know our greatest path of evolution and of expansion. And for you, with that Mercury, with that Jupiterian energy, indeed, study, logic, thinking, and learning as much as you can is of value and is of importance. But it's also of value and of importance to allow your comprehension of broader things to not hinder you from restricting your soul from going through certain experiences because you're thinking too much about the experience, if that makes sense. And so yeah, that's what Jupiter and Mercury does. Jupiter and Gemini does. When it's in Gemini, Jupiter likes to analyze and view every single detail of the soul's evolution. And because Mercury, or Gemini rather I should say, is a very sense orientated sign. It does rely a lot upon its interpretation of the physical world, its understanding from a logical and rational. It heavily depends on reason, right? And we can't reason certain spiritual things because that's the case. Like Virgo, like Jupiter in Virgo or Jupiter in Capricorn, the energy of Jupiter and Gemini can slightly sway towards atheism because it's so logical and rational. And I'm not saying that this is you, because we do, I'm kind of breaking this energy down to explain the way it expresses and why it's debilitated, but we do have to continue to consider the prominent energies manifesting through Sagittarius in other places within your chart, right? Because Sagittarius is the opposite to to Gemini, right? But yeah, so that's why Jupiter is in somewhat of a predicament, and that's why that's why Mercury is somewhat in a predicament. And so it's like the way that this energy plays out is in conclusion, what you need to do is learn to focus your energy, right? And when I say focus your energy, I mean between Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter and Mercury. Bring more of the Mercurial energy into the Jupiter energy, and bring more of the Jupiter energy into the Mercury energy. So engaging in allowing those two planets, which are separate, because that's the opposition, it separates energies and it puts them apart from each other, right? But trying to bridge them, bring them together, allowing yourself to have optimism and faith, but from a perspective of optimism and faith, not because there is a logical explanation, but from the perspective of spirituality, you feel me? But then simultaneously having this ability to logicalize and rationalize things, but from the perspective of not from the perspective of the experiences that you've had already, or from the broader perspective of the experiences that you're having, but more so from the perspective of what are you going through right now, and what's the reason and logic behind what you're going through right now specifically. Like Mercury in Sagittarius has a broader view on things, and it's like, and because of that, it may let certain things get over it, because Mercury in Sagittarius is looking at the greater picture, but then Jupiter in Sagittarius is looking at like the little picture. So yeah, there needs to be like a swapping of energies between those two. And now when it comes to your energies, the least dominant energy, right, we are going to look into the energy of, so that's going to be the energy of Saturn. You feel what I'm saying? The energies of Saturn, because the energies of Uranus has some pretty good aspects, right? Like Uranus is, for example, sextiling your sun. Uranus is sextiling your sun, right? Which is a good harmonious aspect. So it's not as negative or as detrimented as Saturn is. Now, this energy of Jupiter manifests again in Saturn, right? So ultimately, like I mentioned earlier, your soul's energetic origin has to be Jupiterian. And if I was to go deeper, I would say it's the third emanation within the fiery state, right? And you can do more digging and research into that and what all that means. But yeah, like because each soul, it's kind of like, you can say, I'll use myself as an example. I'll crucify myself on the cross. So you can say, for example, I was born in Africa, right? And we can say Africa as being like the planetary family that I was born in, right? And then we can say I was born in Chad. Chad being the element of the planetary energy I was born in. So, no, I'll keep on keeping it simple. And then you can say I was born in Gemini, right? And in Gemini can be the emanation of the element I was born in. So Africa is the planet. Chad is the element associated with that planet. Because, for example, if Chad was Mars, right, then the country within that continent signifying the elements would either be water or fire, right? Because both water and fire are associated with Mars, Scorpio, and Aries. Now, if in Gemini was fire, then that would be the first emanation. But if in Gemini was water, then that would mean that I was born in the second emanation of the water element. So your soul has a planetary origin, it has an elemental origin, and then it has an emanation of origin. So in this case, it's Jupiter, right? The element is fire, and the emanation is the third, because Sagittarius is the third fire sign. It's the third to emanate. You feel what I'm saying? To come into existence. So I hope that made sense to you, that breakdown right there. But okay. So to get more into detail with all of this, Saturn, right? Saturn is within the 9th house. What is the 9th house? The 9th house, oof, man oh man, your chart is pretty complex. Saturn is within the house of Mercury. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Your chart is pretty complex. And so Saturn being in the 9th house, right, whichever house that Jupiter expresses through, it expresses as abundance, right? Whatever house that Mercury expresses through, it expresses as thoughts, as rationalization, thinking, right? So there's a lot of thinking that is placed and put into your first house, your personality, your personal life, and personal experiences. And then there's a lot of expansion that happens when it comes to your 7th house, which is like your engagements with the public, your engagements with relationships, one-on-one relationships. You may have a tendency of continuously meeting new people all the time, possibly. And there's also the energy of Saturn, right, which kind of plays out as restriction and poverty. And when I say poverty, I mean scarce, right, like not enough. Because poverty is not always monetary or money-wise, right? You can be impoverished in health, impoverished in wisdom, impoverished, etc., in experiences, right? And so, with that being said, Saturn being the planet that is the weakest or the least prominent, right? Because we don't like that word weak. What this indicates is that within your life, when it comes to experiences, like it's not too bad because Saturn is in a earth sign, right? And Saturn likes being in the earth signs, but Saturn is retrograde as well. We gotta take that into consideration. Saturn ultimately is expressing through this house. Let's talk about the 9th house is. The 9th house is the house of religion. It's the house that deals with Jacob's ladder, right? And when I say Jacob's ladder, that allegory speaks upon the path of ascension in which the soul must take, right? This is the ladder that angels ascend and descend from, right? And in so many ways, if we are truly God's children, then we are, or we have the capacity to become angels, right? That's in our innate nature. Like that's we are all growing up to become, right? Yeah. And so yeah, it deals with higher thoughts, higher perspective, higher perception. So I'm sure you're aware the 9th house is the house of Sagittarius. And this is why I say you have a very interesting chart, because the energy of Sagittarius kind of manifests a couple of different places of prominence for you. And even with the least dominant energy, it's a Sagittarian type of energy or expression. And so, you know, the 9th house, it also deals with books, if I haven't mentioned that. It deals specifically with the religious texts like the Torah, the Bible, the Quran, all that good stuff. And yeah, you know, it deals with travel, not just physical. It doesn't just deal with any form of travel. It deals with long distance travel. It deals with physical long distance travel, mental long distance travel, emotional long distance travel, and even spiritual long distance travel. An example of a mental or spiritual long distance travel is reading a book, right? And then mentally going far, but then spiritually going far, because that book has all these deep concepts and perceptions upon it. You know what I'm saying? That's like an example. or like getting into a very intimate, crazy relationship with someone, and then emotionally going deep. That's an example of, that's more like a Scorpio energy, but it's kind of, because I brought up emotions, like if you think of long travels emotionally, then that would be like the energy of Scorpio. That would be that example. But the ninth house is more like mental and spiritual travel, if anything. Emotional travel is more Scorpio. Anyways, as I was breaking this energy down, when it comes to the energy of Saturn, right? Let me look real quick again to see the aspects that Saturn is making. So Saturn doesn't really have any aspects except for the fact that it is sextiling your Jupiter. Give me a sec. Is it sextiling your Jupiter though? Yeah, so Saturn is sextiling your Jupiter, and Saturn is yeah, that's it pretty much. Saturn is just sextiling your Jupiter, and it's squaring your ascendant. Oh, and Saturn is squaring your ascendant. So Saturn is squaring your ascendant, sextiling your Jupiter, and is that it? Or I think I think that's it for Saturn. Yeah, so Saturn is sextiling your Jupiter and squaring your ascendant. So with Saturn squaring your ascendant, right? Like the energies and the boundaries of the Saturnian energy have throughout your life tremendously contributed to restrictions within your personal life, and the energies of the restrictiveness are expressed in the area of your life that deals with philosophy, religion, spirituality. So maybe in the past, maybe you may have freed yourself of this, because Sagittarius is a sign that forever wants to be free. You know, so even when it's not free, Sagittarius is like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to be free. So maybe you've finally freed yourself of this energy. But ultimately, Saturn squaring your first house from the ninth house in the sign Virgo, right, kind of indicates that like your philosophy and your viewpoint on Virgonian things have kind of played a very restrictive energy on your Sagittarian personality and nature. And so the way that this energy can express, possibly even, it could be like Virgo is a very practical, applicable, and industrial sign that deals with the accumulation of resources, the accumulation of wealth, right? Things like that. And so Virgo, one of the things it rules and it deals with is labor. It deals with work. It deals with security and stability as well. But not like Taurus, where Taurus will be okay and fine with having everything it needs to live a simple life. Virgo kind of wants to have everything it needs and then some, so it can be resourceful enough to help others, right? That's more of the Virgo energy. And so where the square comes in between the ninth house in Virgo and the first house in Sagittarius is Sagittarius may kind of want to just, because this is Virgo, this is Mercury, Jupiter energy. Sagittarius may just want to optimistically be free and live its life, maybe off-grid and do as it wishes and do as it pleases. But then the Saturn and Virgo energy kind of presents to it certain restrictions and certain limitations that are as a result of life and the experience. So hold on, give me a sec. Before I get into that, let me explain that the ninth house deals with one's viewpoints and perceptions on life, in the sense that within us we all have a moral compass that guides us in life, right? We all have a moral and ethical compass that is a result of our various experiences that we've had. And so to look into your ninth house, right, to get the details in, your ninth house is not ruled by, your ninth house is ruled by the sun. So the sun rules your ninth house. Your ninth house is in Leo. And then you have, the sun in Capricorn in the second house. So these energies are all tied together, you know what I'm saying? And so Saturn being in the ninth house is adding more to the restrictive energies of your sun, which is the ruler of your ninth house, being in the ninth house. And so, this isn't really the place to break all of that down, right? Because that wasn't really the point of this session. But if you're interested in us going into how the planetary rulers are influencing each other, then we can get into that. But I'll just say that there is this Saturnian energy that's amplified. And Saturn, the sun is ruling the ninth house in the sign Capricorn from the second house. So this indicates that the initial exposure to the energies that built your philosophy and your perspective on life may have rather been rounded in physicalness and tangibility, and maybe within the last 3 years you may have gotten into the space of releasing and freeing yourself from those energies. But ultimately the energy that is having a difficulty in expressing into this life is that Saturn in Virgo in the ninth house, which is ultimately all about finding ways to practically express your philosophy and your spirituality and your religion into this world. Like taking your philosophy and spirituality, which is like the ninth house, and maybe writing books about it, maybe doing lectures on it, right? Which would be like, it's really a lot deeper than that, and we'd have to look into the sun and all that good stuff. So I'll kind of generalize it because, all that details is kind of for a whole different reading. It's like with the Saturn energy, that may be where the intangibleness may express. With Jupiter being in Gemini, also, right, because Jupiter is the planet of experience, there may be this backward energy of experiences being mental, because Sagittarius, I wonder where you have, what decan you have, what decan you have Sagittarius and Mercury in. So, okay, that's interesting. And that's the decan of illumination. So Sagittarius is in the decan of illumination. Mercury is in the decan of illumination. And so the way that this may play out is, the sign of experience, Sagittarius, because it's in the sign of the mind. Your experiences may be more mental. And so you may have a bunch of mental experiences, right? And that energy of mental experiences is reflected in Jupiter and Gemini as well, where it's like your viewpoint on going out into the world and allowing yourself to experience may kind of be like you reading something and getting information and knowledge about it, And then, man, where's your Mars at though? And then your Mars is in Leo. Okay. Mars is in Leo in the 6th house. But yeah, you know, without getting too deep and intricate into this, because, you know, it is like astrology does go, you know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like when you're looking at this, then you gotta look at that, and you gotta look at that, and you gotta piece them all together. And that is why I usually do like the 5 sessions, because at the end, everything kind of gets pieced together, if that makes sense. So it's not even that you're paying for, like, instead of looking at it as you're paying for the courses separately, you're more so paying for, the sessions separately, you're more so paying for the build-up of what all of this knowledge put together at the end is going to bring you to, you know. And so it does take us covering the things that you may already know in order for us to later be able to connect them together. But I'm pretty sure you're able to connect them yourself, right? Because you have like that awareness. But yeah, you know, I would say that pretty much is that. Your most prominent planet being Mercury, and then the least prominent being Saturn. Not Jupiter, Saturn. But the planet that is the greatest indicator of your soul's original sign or original origin signature, right, is Jupiter and the energy of Sagittarius. But that pretty much concludes that, and I hope that this has been enlightening for you. And yeah, peace. I most definitely look forward to hearing back from you. Peace.